The voice of Qui-Gon Jinn echoed through the meditation chamber as Harry and Yoda listened intently. Qui-Gon hadn't been able to gain too much information on the wizarding world, but knew that what was once Dumbledore's army had been growing stronger. But without the help of the Jedi, they were no match. Furthermore, he sensed a different threat, one distinct from Voldemort, but a worthy ally. Before Harry could ask any further questions, Qui-Gon disappeared, leaving Harry grasping at thin air. Harry knew that when Voldemort saw him, there would be no holding back. It would be a battle to the death. Looking up, Harry finds the bearded Jedi Master of Obi-Wan Kenobi. With Anakin still recovering, Harry and Obi-Wan head for the Jedi Archives, intent on searching the galaxy for Harry's world. But again, like Kamino, it did not appear on their records. Someone did not want it to be found. And this time, there will be no bounty hunter to be tracked down. But perhaps, another world of magic users may be able to assist them. With no other paths to follow, Harry and Obi-Wan head for the planet of Dathomir, where the Jedi maintain cordial ties, compared to what Dooku ever had. Eventually descending through the red haze, Obi-Wan was surprised to find Night Sister warriors pointing pikes in his direction. Obi-Wan had thought Dooku and Grievous had ripped the place to shreds, but Talzin and Ventress had managed to feed off the magical core of the planet and stage a return. From the red haze emerged Asajj Ventress, with Mother Talzin by her side. With a wave of a hand, the warriors lower their pikes, as Obi-Wan and Harry are allowed into their new makeshift base. Inside the base, the Night Sisters are quick to thank the Jedi for the fall of Sidious. Even if Grievous was still lurking in the Outer Rim, he wouldn't be a threat without the leadership and direction of Dooku. Eventually, conversation turns to why Obi-Wan and Harry had arrived on Dathomir. Outlining their issue of the untraceable magical civilization, Mother Talzin leads them to a small cauldron and uses the magical core of the planet to extract a scroll entitled The Missing 38. Handing it to Obi-Wan, he finds himself recognizing a lot of the planet's names, along with their coordinates, having heard of stories from Grandmaster Yoda. Yet on the number 39, Harry's world was missing. With a swipe of her hand, Talzin unveils the coordinates. No wonder the Jedi did not have data on Harry's world. It was far away from anything meaningful. Getting supplies from Coruscant would be a total nightmare. Taking the scroll from Talzin and Ventress, the duo request for the Night Sisters help in fighting Voldemort, but the Night Sisters would stay out of it as there was no Sith involvement. Their primary focus for now was rebuilding what was once a feared clan. Bowing goodbye, Obi-Wan and Harry head back to Coruscant. Arriving at the council chambers, Obi-Wan places the scroll in the middle of the chamber, as the other members gather to inspect the object. No starship currently had the range to reach such coordinates without refueling, and with no worlds with civilization nearby, this made travel nearly impossible. However, Harry and Obi-Wan both knew of a genius mechanic. Allowing the council to inspect the scroll further, the duo head for the Jedi Temple Halls of Healing, where Anakin is sitting up, and impatient to get back to his Jedi duties. When a Jedi healer finally arrives to release Anakin, the Twi'lek urged Anakin to have ample rest for the next few days. Obi-Wan sighs, knowing the exact opposite of that would happen. Anakin was no good at sitting around. Upon hearing of a new type of ship needing to be developed, Anakin sprinted at full speed towards the Jedi Temple hangar. Closely inspecting several of the experimental vessels, Anakin noticed that the majority of the vessels were fueled by pelagium fuel, which was infamous for its lack of reliability. Perhaps this was the root of the issue. Looking through other fuels, Anakin knows that rhydonium was far too explosive, and anthracite was too rare. However, oil was a substance rarely used for fuel, and in abundance. Using his Muggle knowledge, Harry points out that oil has never been able to travel this distance required for this journey, but was fairly reliable. A new type of fuel is required. A combination of rhydonium and oil. Anakin contacts several of Coruscant's most advanced industrial sites, and then heads back to his room, contemplating this new task. Meanwhile, the council have just finished inspecting the scroll as Obi-Wan and Harry walk back in, with Anakin's proposal for a new type of fuel. The council exchange pensive expressions. Not only was such a development a drain on the Republic's resources, but many of the worlds containing the substances were not Jedi friendly. Whilst the Republic senators were doing their best to clean up the mess caused by Palpatine, it would be a slow process. Suddenly, Harry collapsed to the floor, grasping at his scar in pain. Voldemort was happy. The Jedi Council immediately rushed over to check on the spectacled wizard. Despite Harry repeatedly saying that he was fine, he was dragged into the Jedi Halls of Healing. Being scanned by Jedi healer Rig Nima, Harry is given a clean bill of health. Master Windu, however, is not impressed. Searching Harry's mind with the Force, Master Windu finds something odd, buried deep inside Harry's soul. Attempting to pull it out, Harry screams in pain, his eyes becoming possessed with hate. Windu releases Harry, as Harry slumps back onto the bed. Jedi healers immediately surround Harry's bedside and ask the Jedi Masters to leave. Anakin immediately starts berating Windu, telling him he should have noticed that Harry was in considerable pain. Windu turned away in disgust. As Harry rests, Anakin heads back to the Jedi hangar, searching for any news on the development of the new fuel. Anakin finds that the refinement of the new fuel is already underway, with funds pouring in from all areas of the galaxy, having seen the work the Jedi had already done. With this good news, Anakin heads back to the council chamber, where there is a hushed silence. Anakin steps forward, declaring news of the new fuel, but there is no response. Yoda finally speaks up, quietly muttering that Harry must die. Moving into a state of deep meditation, the room rumbles slightly as the voice of Qui-Gon could be heard once more, yelling his annoyance at the Jedi Council for their narrow-minded thinking. Had the Council not learnt anything from the Clone Wars? Things could always be seen from a certain point of view. Yes, Harry had to die, but only the part not belonging to him. Anakin, who was out of his meditative state, remembers briefly hearing about Horcruxes from Harry before the fall of Sidious, but he had never heard of them being associated to living beings. Could Harry be one such example? Leaving the council to continue to be told off by their former friend, Anakin headed back to the halls of healing. With the other healers preoccupied by other patients, Anakin manages to sneak in undetected and sees Harry awake, looking visibly cross. He had not approved of Master Windu's sudden invasion into his soul. Anakin calms Harry down with hushed whispers, and gradually asks him more about these mysterious objects known as Horcruxes. Confirming that Horcruxes require the container to be damaged beyond repair, Anakin finally broke the news that the council no doubt didn't want Harry to know. Harry slumps back onto his bed in thought. Did Voldemort have to kill him, or could the Jedi kill him themselves? In no book Hermione had summoned from Dumbledore's office had it mentioned that the maker of the Horcrux had to kill the living Horcrux. After all, Harry could not even imagine the pain his friends would suffer seeing Voldemort supposedly killing him. But it could prove to be a useful trick. Shaking these doubts from his mind, he looked at Anakin straight in his eyes, asking the Jedi to help kill the fragment of his soul belonging to Voldemort. Anakin hurries back to the council chamber and tells them what must be done. It was the least they could do for Harry. The entire Jedi Council looked somberly towards the floor. Although Harry would not actually perish, it felt as if they were losing a presence. The council moved to relieve Harry of his pain, despite protests from the Jedi Circle of Healers. Now sitting in the middle of the floor of the council chamber, Harry knew what the snitch contained. It was Dumbledore's way of softening the blow of Harry's death, but Harry knew he wouldn't be dying, even if he had accepted his fate. Moving the snitch softly to his lips, Harry closed his eyes as the stone hovered above the snitch, and Harry could hear the voices of his family and friends. They tell him not about death, but that there would always be a choice. Putting Harry into stasis, the whole council focuses upon Harry's life force. Harry collapses to the floor. Between a state of life and death, Harry dresses himself with clothes, and sees the towering figure of Professor Dumbledore. Everything seemed just so simple. Looking into the distance, he sees the afterlife. Harry gets straight to the point, and attempts to ask Dumbledore how he was going to find the location of the remaining Horcruxes, now without the help of Voldemort's connection. But Dumbledore merely hummed and walked away. Harry knew what Dumbledore was implying. Everything he needed was already there. Waking back up, Harry saw the eyes of the entire Jedi Council bearing into him with curiosity. Harry gets to his feet, feeling a great weight off of his shoulders. It was no wonder the locket had affected him more than Hermione. He had been carrying the weight of 2 Horcruxes. Equipping his wand in his hand, Harry felt a surge of power, unleashed by the absence of the Horcrux. Harry wordlessly levitated all of the Council's chairs, before dropping them down again. With his new powers, Harry would make Voldemort pay for what Harry had lost. The Jedi Council are in shock at Harry's display of power. They had known him to be more than capable of holding his own, but this was beyond what they had seen. Yoda leaps off his chair, and leads Harry to the training room, where he puts Harry's new powers to the test. Starting with several force pushes, Harry is able to cast a shield charm without his wand, and using his wand hand, cast spells at Yoda. Yoda uses his training blade and deflects the hits, increasing the power on his force pushes, which causes Harry to stumble. Harry gets up, but found himself to be exhausted. His stamina had not caught up to the increase in his power. With a swipe of his hand, Yoda sends Harry to the lightly foamed floor in a heap. Over the next several days, Harry worked on controlling his new powers, with a variety of Jedi Masters, whilst the new fuel was being refined. Eventually, Harry managed to gain sufficient control of his powers, as well as find a way to replenish his energy quickly, with the help of Ki-Adi-Mundi. But despite the Jedi attempting to instill patience, Harry was itching to get going. Not knowing the condition of his friends interrupted his every waking hour. For all he knew, he could be walking into a world infested with Death Eaters. His previous connection to Voldemort had given him some indication of what was happening in the wizarding world, but without it, he was now lost. Heading to the missions room for what he hoped to be a final time, Obi-Wan and Anakin outlined the plan of reaching Hogwarts, where Harry planned to lure Voldemort. Whilst it was impossible to plot the coordinates of Hogwarts, Harry had given every possible method of reaching their destination, mainly by following the train tracks from King's Cross Station. Harry had also outlined the skill level of the Death Eaters and Voldemort's potential allies. However, the knowledge of the Horcruxes was limited to Harry's most trusted Jedi in case there was a traitor amongst them. With the briefing over, Harry headed with Anakin, Ahsoka and Obi-Wan to a Republic gunship and grasped a handle on the ceiling as the gunship took flight. The side doors closed with a hiss, leaving the Jedi alone with several clone troopers. Whilst Ahsoka and Anakin were bickering away, Obi-Wan and Harry stood in silence, with the upcoming battle on their minds. Moving upwards into the atmosphere, Harry peers out of the window and sees an enormous ship awaiting their arrival. At over 1 kilometre long, Obi-Wan's Venator-class Star Destroyer could be mistaken for a moon, as the clone pilot seamlessly manoeuvred into the giant hangar. Heading to the command deck, Harry is taken aback by the array of technology on display. He had thought starfighters and cruisers were complicated, but even Hermione couldn't figure the controls on this ship. Harry could also see several other smaller ships making their way towards him, before they all vanished into light speed. The subsequent journey was taken up by Obi-Wan and Harry going through their plan once more, but it all hinged on the location of Voldemort. Finally hovering above the Earth's atmosphere, the Star Destroyer did well not to collide with satellites and debris hovering in the atmosphere. Hovering above Harry's suggested coordinates, Harry entered a starfighter with Obi-Wan, and leading a small squadron, they headed for King's Cross Station, aiming to use the lights below as a guide. Now through the clouds, suddenly, the Jedi find themselves in a myriad of broomsticks and spells, as Obi-Wan weaves his way through. What had happened whilst he was away? Harry thought through his blind panic. Suddenly, the starfighter begins to jolt from side to side, as looking out of the window, Obi-Wan sees that one of the energy capacitors is beginning to catch fire. Obi-Wan attempts to put the fire out with the Force, but it continues to spread. In response to this, Harry blasts open the canopy, and casts the most powerful jet of water he possibly could, immediately extinguishing the flames. However, the jet is so powerful that it causes damage further back in the starboard power cell. As a result, Obi-Wan has to work hard to maintain control, and together, they haphazardly land in the field. Leaping out of the heavily damaged cockpit, Obi-Wan and Harry turn around and see the starfighter erupting into flames once more. Obi-Wan requests for Anakin in his comlink, but he is nowhere to be found. Lighting his wand, Harry attempts to look for any roads or signs, but all he could see around him was acres of farmland. Obi-Wan lowers Harry's wand hand and gesticulates in the opposite direction where another ship had crash landed. Sprinting towards it, they see Anakin and Ahsoka coughing and spluttering their way out. Together, they attempt to contact any of their clones or Jedi, but their communications are heavily distorted. Anakin and Obi-Wan begin to argue over which way to go, but Ahsoka points out a distant light. Making their way towards it, they think that it's a beacon of some sort. Perhaps one of the clones has sent out a distress signal. Moving closer, Harry suddenly stops. This was not a beacon, but the Dark Mark. Harry orders the Jedi to stop immediately, and they ignite their lightsabers in anticipation, with Anakin ordering R2-D2 to remain with Obi-Wan's nearly broken ship, were anything to go wrong. Harry steps forward first, and casts a human presence revealing spell, detecting a dozen or so figures in a large farmhouse. Approaching with tentative steps, the group dispose of one masked Death Eater, with a combination of a stunning spell and a vertical lightsaber strike. Harry finds that the front door is already unlocked. Giving it a gentle push, they find themselves in a wide room, when suddenly, spells came in from all directions as figures emerged from the walls. Harry failed to recognise them, but deemed them not to be skill as the Death Eaters he had previously come across. Casting a powerful shield charm, Harry edges his way towards the figures, who he could now make out to be Snatchers. With the help of Obi-Wan, Harry took care of half of the wizards, whilst Anakin and Ahsoka shredded the other half. Harry then led the Jedi to another room, where several clones had been chained to the walls, with silencing charms, looking severely beaten up. Undoing all of the charms and the chains, Anakin cushions their fall from the wall, whilst Obi-Wan uses the Force to heal them. Whilst Obi-Wan is able to heal their body, Harry needs to reverse the stinging hexes which have disfigured their faces and impaired their vision. To Harry's relief, unforgivable curses will appear to have not been used. The quartet are finally able to recognise the face of Captain Rex, alongside those of 6 advanced Recon Force troopers. Rex looks at Anakin with a glazed look on his face, seemingly unaware of his surroundings. When Anakin asks him if he knew where the others were, Rex has no idea. It was clear he had been affected by a mild Confundus charm. The others are also confused, but remember that the Snatchers had been delighted about something. The Dark Mark, Harry thought to himself. Lighting his wand fully, they begin to look for any dead bodies. Harry turns around at a call from Ahsoka, and outside, hidden amongst the yew hedges, was the body of Jedi Master Eth Koth. Whilst the Zabrak was no longer a part of the Jedi Council, it seemed very odd to the Jedi that Master Koth would have been defeated so easily, having held his own against General Grievous. Perhaps, something darker was already occurring. Inspecting his body, Harry finds it curious that there were no visible signs of spell damage, nor any other wounds. Carrying the body over his shoulder, Rex leads the confused legion of soldiers back inside, where they consult a map conveniently left over by the Snatchers. Although the map may have been torn in some places, Harry only needed to find one name. The name of Charing Cross Station. Just as Harry is about to lead them out of the rear entrance, Obi-Wan's comlink flashes and beeps. They are all relieved to hear the voice of Grandmaster Yoda. Yoda has also encountered trouble in the form of Snatchers, to which Obi-Wan notes the demise of Eth Koth. Yoda is not saddened, rather concerned. He would need to contact all of the other Jedi before they were met with the same fate. Turning the comlink off, the slightly happier Legion head for Charing Cross, with some of London's high-rise buildings now illuminated by their lights. Following the directions on their map, the streets are eerily quiet. It was clear that Voldemort's forces had already made their mark in the Muggle world. After what seemed like days, the small figure of Grandmaster Yoda could be seen, standing outside the leaky cauldron, although to the Jedi, it appeared to be a broken down shop. Yoda offers his condolences for Master Koth before the group head inside. The inside is nearly empty, apart from Tom, who greets Harry with a timid wave of his hand. No doubt Death Eaters have been inside here too. Harry led them to the back of the leaky cauldron and tapped the correct brick in the wall, like Hagrid had done all those years ago. If Harry had thought Diagon Alley was quiet last year, Voldemort's takeover had reduced this once buzzing streets to a graveyard of memories. Everywhere from Ollivanders to quality Quidditch supplies was barren. However, walking a little further, Harry notices one establishment remains, the Gringotts Wizarding Bank. But then, Harry notices a familiar figure, the Death Eater of Travers. Ducking behind a fruit cart, he asks Anakin and Obi-Wan to use their mind tricks on him, hoping to get any useful information. Nothing useful emerges from Travers, and Harry obliviates him before leaving him unconscious on the floor. But his mere presence had indicated that Gringotts was significant. Confronting the two guards outside, the group head in, with the aim of seizing whatever was being protected. Harry immediately recognised Griphook, who beckoned him to a small desk. It was no use hiding from the wizarding world for any longer. Asking Griphook what was inside, the crafty goblin remained vague, merely stating that whatever it was that Harry wanted was stolen by the wizards from the goblins. Harry was getting nowhere, but then he sees the figure of Rex sliding across the marble floor as Bellatrix Lestrange walked in. There was no doubt which vault Harry needed to get to now. Bellatrix had obviously not been expecting much resistance, as she strode into the bank by herself, insulted that she had been attacked. Harry gritted his teeth, still wanting revenge for Sirius, but knew he could not be spotted yet. Before he could decide what to do, Anakin and Obi-Wan charged with their lightsabers in front of them, repelling Bellatrix's dark curses with their blades. Bellatrix's face turned from one of sadistic pleasure to horror. She had never seen such combatants before. Retreating back towards the exit, Bellatrix transfigures one of the desks into a stone wall, giving her time to recover. But unnoticed by the dark pureblood was Harry sneaking his way around the back of the desks, which were now full of goblins using the swords to defend from the attacks. With a carefully aimed severing charm, Harry managed to find a way through Bellatrix's defences, as her shield only partially deflected the charm, grazing the side of her head. Looking around to see the source of the attack, she is caught unawares by Yoda's force push, sending her out of the building. Stumbling to her feet, she apparates back to her master. The goblins get up, some of them bearing gruesome scars. The Jedi deactivate their lightsabers, and Harry returns to the centre of the main hallway. Obi-Wan takes charge, and begins conversing with the goblins, leaving Harry to shake his head. Negotiating with goblins was never a good idea. Anakin put a hand on Harry's shoulder, assuring him that Obi-Wan had everything under control. To Harry's amazement, Obi-Wan begins to manipulate the goblins, telling him how they were not wizards, thus bore no grudge to their kind. He truly was the negotiator. One goblin is quick to point to Harry, but the other goblins quieten his calls, deeming Harry to be unlike the foul wizarding kind that had entered their walls most times. The goblins serenaded Harry and the Jedi through to the narrow passageway, with the clones remaining behind, as they didn't fit into the cart. After passing the thief's downfall, the Jedi get their first look at the dragon. Anakin merely shrugs at the 6-ton Ukrainian iron belly, which clattered against his chains. The crate dragon he'd seen on Tatooine was much bigger than this. Igniting his blade, he made a move to jump out of the cart, but he hovered in the air, stopped by the combination of Yoda and Obi-Wan. Anakin was still as reckless as ever. Lowering back down to the cart, looking slightly embarrassed, the dragon is fortunately still relatively quiet, and the goblin uses the clankers to tame the beast. Placing a hand on the door of the vault, the entrance opens to the Lestrange vault, revealing mountains of galleons and artifacts, but there was only one artifact that Harry was looking for, a Horcrux. Inching his way forward, Harry felt a sudden burn on his right leg, alongside a clattering sound as several trophies fell to the floor. Anakin, Obi-Wan and Windu instantly headed back out, knowing that their tall frames would become an obstruction. As careful as the remaining occupants were, the room soon began to stack full of artifacts, but Harry finally had his eyes on the prize, the cup of Helga Hufflepuff emblazoned by a badger. In a desperate attempt to seize the Horcrux, Harry used a summoning charm, and not to his surprise, it failed to move. The goblin laughed at Harry's miserable attempt, but his laughter was cut short, as behind him, Ahsoka and Yoda were levitating the cup towards them. Harry could have smacked himself in the head for his stupidity, were he not in piles of burning metal. As Hermione had said in first year, many of the greatest wizards didn't possess an ounce of logic. Now swimming through the metal, Ahsoka placed the cup in a small pouch, whilst Yoda levitated Harry out of the vault. As he healed himself with his wand, he cursed himself for his short-sightedness. Getting back into the cart, the goblin's lips curled at the discomfort endured. But as they were reaching the top, a deep rumbling sound echoed against the walls, as in front of the cart, the clone suddenly appeared. The goblin pulled upon the lever in the cart, stopping it instantly, now alerted to the severity of the situation. Bellatrix had brought her friends along. The cart now moved back down the path, with the previously absent clones desperately clinging on. Harry could see no way out. They were encased in his underground maze. The goblin, however, had other ideas. Violently shifting the cart from side to side, Harry was surprised to see the clones hanging on, as they skipped from track to track. Now Harry could see the reason for the manoeuvres. Coming down the same track as themselves were carts containing all of the bank's other goblins as they were plotting to escape. Suddenly, the carts all stopped simultaneously. The head goblin pressed his hand on what was seemingly a blank wall, but revealed a hidden passageway. The group ducked to avoid the low ceiling, watching as the wall behind sealed shut. The torches on the walls provided sufficient lighting, and after a long walk, a rusty lift was revealed. Everyone stepped inside, with charms accounting for the weight of the group. The lift finally stopped, rocking from side to side, and the door swung open, revealing an innocuous building. The group stepped out in relief, knowing they had escaped a fate far worse than the loss of a bank. For the goblins, however, this was now a commitment to fight against Voldemort, something which they had tried so hard to avoid. Back at Gringotts, Voldemort strode through, his cloak occasionally billowing into Nagini beside him. Upon Bellatrix's return to his base, Voldemort stubbornly refused to believe what she had said. He had allowed for her insanity in return for her loyalty, but this was too far. Surely there could not be mysterious warriors as powerful as wizards, working against his dark forces. From what Bellatrix had told him, they had been incredibly powerful and coordinated. This immediately brought his mind to the pest that was Harry Potter. Could Potter be in league with these mysterious warriors? It would partially explain his disappearance from the wizarding world. But from what Cerberus had told him, Potter was nothing but an average wizard. Something did not add up. Walking into the depths of the bank, he walked down the maze of tracks to the location of his Horcrux. Having misplaced his trust in Lucius to protect the diary, Voldemort had been reluctant to place another fragment of his soul in the trust of Bellatrix, but the witch had proved to be loyal. Now deep in the underground cavern, Voldemort saw the dragon, howling in pain, but restrained by its chains. Striding to the entrance of the vault, Voldemort summoned the corpse of a goblin and roughly placed his hand on the door. The door swung open, and hundreds upon hundreds of trinkets rolled out, burning Voldemort's robes. With a flick of his wand, half of the pile vanished, allowing him to walk through. Taking one step at a time, his eyes narrow, looking for the Horcrux. It is nowhere to be found. Letting out a scream of anger, the sound ripples off of the damaged walls. Without a moment's hesitation, the Dark Lord apparated to the gaunt shack. Looking under the floorboards, this time there was no sign of the ring. Now moving to the crystal cave, again there was no sign of the locket. Moving to the other locations at speed, he is relieved to find those Horcruxes were still in place and guarded. Now he thought about who had taken them. His mind could only point to Dumbledore, but he was now dead. It was impossible for Harry Potter to have taken them. After all, he would surely have noticed through his connection to the boy. He would need to talk to Cerberus immediately. Back outside of Gringotts, Harry, Jedi and the clones bid farewell to the goblins, making their way through the streets of London. With only Harry's limited knowledge and their small-scale map, the group sneak around, now looking for the other Jedi. Their wanderings lead them to the skyscraper of Tower 42, providing them with a perfect vantage point, and perhaps an area to extend their signal range. The main entrance, as expected, is closed, as is most of London at this point. Harry uses a blasting curse and blows down the automatic doors, showering the floor with glass. The alarms start to go off, but Anakin runs his lightsaber along the walls, and eventually they fade away. Ahsoka is not pleased with her master's display, and using the Force, casually moves down a switch which controls all of the alarms. Moving to the lift, which is surprisingly still working, the group enter and head to the top of the building. Master Yoda ignites his blade in caution as they exit the lift, sensing that they may not be alone. Creeping their way around the perimeter, Yoda finally lowers his blade as he sees Commander Cody. Cody lowers the blaster he had been pointing in relief at the sight of the Jedi. He had thought them to be dead. Cody leads the now curious Jedi and clones to the rear of the facility, where they meet more clones. These clones went by the name of Clone Force 99. The clone tech had already been one step of the Jedi, aiming to see contact with the other Jedi. From the rooftop, no sign of the others could be seen. Yoda, Anakin, Windu and Obi-Wan enter a deep meditation, aiming to feel their locations. Yoda could see a station, fortified by the Wolf Pack. Anakin could see a castle, housing Master Unduli. Obi-Wan sensed a hospital, where Master Sakura is keeping her clones. And finally, Master Windu saw the leaky cauldron, where Shaak Ti was stationed outside. Although that did not account for all of the Jedi, it was at least a start. Now with Tech's map, the Jedi knew where they were going. Splitting up was not a good idea, as their initial arrival approved. With no time to waste, the Jedi jumped straight off of the building, landing on the streets below, without a sound. The clones and Harry are the next to jump. Harry, absolutely terrified, with a vice-like grip on his wand. To his relief, the Jedi catch him in time, bringing him to a controlled stop. Harry never wanted to do that again. His organs felt like they rearranged themselves mid-flight. Resisting the urge to empty the contents of his stomach, Harry followed Tech to a familiar location, and one that Harry had visited before. The Tower of London. Sprinting through the empty streets, Harry placed a disillusionment charm on himself, and the group finally reached a public entrance, laying their eyes upon a sight that they did not wish to see. A dozen masked Death Eaters had their wands primed upon the Jedi, with no inclination of showing mercy, rolling to opposing sides, before Yoda pushes two kiosks into the path of the Death Eaters. The Death Eaters put up a shield charm, and the wood bounces harmlessly onto the ground. The clones use their ascension cables and climb the side of the walls, attempting to flank the Death Eaters. The Death Eaters are forced to split up, allowing the Jedi to take down 4 of them and barge their way through the front entrance, slicing the iron gates. But this causes the clones to be exposed, with Captain Rex hit by a Jellyleg's curse. Wrecker has had enough and rushes straight towards 2 Death Eaters, hoisting them both in the air and slamming them into the wall, breaking their spines. Crosshair then simultaneously took out 2 more Death Eaters with his sniper rifle. On the other side of the entrance, the Jedi take out the remainder of the Death Eaters with relative ease, causing Harry to be suspicious. Death Eaters were not that weak. After undoing the curse on Rex, Harry used a vanishing spell on one of the Death Eaters' masks, and Harry now knew why they were so weak. These were merely animated dummies. Obi-Wan did a more thorough search of the bodies, and finds each of them with a port key, clearly aimed to lure any witch or wizard. It was best to leave them alone for now. Whilst the Jedi had been fighting the Death Eaters, Tech and Hunter had been searching for Master Unduli, whom Anakin had previously felt was here. Discarding the dummies to one side, together they enter the complex. Hunter led the way, with Tech giving out directions, but they were all stopped in their tracks by a scream of pain. All of them sprinted towards the noise, finding themselves in a room of torture devices. Master Unduli was tied to the rack, her limbs stretching in all directions, and only her use of the Force stopping them flying off. Anakin and Ahsoka cut the bindings off, with precise strikes from their lightsabers, freeing the Jedi. Luminara staggers to her feet, but not before Yoda performs several Force healing techniques to boost her weakened body. The whole building suddenly shook, and the Jedi knew what was arriving. Harry blasts the nearest wall, allowing the Jedi and the clones to leap their way through, exiting from the back. Now moving back towards Charing Cross Station, they see the Tower of London collapsing into flames. This time, it is real Death Eaters, not holding back and using fiend fire without any care. There was no time to waste, or the other Jedi could meet the same fate. Tech took the lead once more, speeding towards the hospital that Obi-Wan had seen. Now entering the street that Obi-Wan had seen, the Jedi and clones stopped, for they saw nothing like a hospital, rather a dilapidated department store. Harry, however, knew exactly where this place was. St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. How Master Sakura got in he had no idea, presumably an accident, but she could be in just as much danger as Master Unduli had been. Harry showed the Jedi and clones inside, where not to Harry's surprise, nobody was waiting for them. But there was no need. Master Sakura's Force presence was loud and clear, for some reason not blocked unlike with Master Unduli. Perhaps it was the lack of pain. Master Sakura and her clones are unharmed. Heading back outside, the scene is now a lot different. The Death Eaters now spread their fire across London, leaving the buildings ablaze. The Muggles are either burnt to a crisp or already evacuated. The Jedi grit their teeth. This would not happen on their watch. Suddenly, from a side alleyway, emerged Shaak Ti, Plo Koon, and the Wolf Pack. looking visibly exhausted, with blood all over. They had experienced at first hand the severity of the damage, and now it was time to restore peace. With a combined force push from all of the Jedi, they pushed the fire back to its source, providing slight respite. Anakin, Ahsoka and Obi-Wan tried to take advantage, moving towards the fire and pushing it back further, despite the protest from Harry. As Harry had predicted, this was a bad idea, as the fire pushed back against them, forcing the trio to run back to their safe spot. Anakin and Obi-Wan perform one giant leap back, but Ahsoka is not so fortunate, the side of her torso igniting. Anakin uses the Force to lift out Ahsoka, before Harry reversed the curse. Looking at the charred robes of Ahsoka, he sees a dark substance seeping from her pouch. Cutting it open, much to Gruta's annoyance, he sees the Hufflepuff's cup has melted from the fiend fire. Perhaps there were uses to this after all. For now though, Harry knew he could not contain the whole fire with one curse. Despite knowing its counter, he would need a lot of time. Placing a protective shield over the Jedi, Harry stepped forward and summoned his new powers from within, undoing the curse meter by meter. The Jedi look on, wondering if they should try and intervene. Their questions are answered by a dozen or so of actual Death Eaters this time, firing spells at incredible speed. Harry immediately reapplied his disillusionment charm, but this sapped some of the energy off of the counter curse, slowing down his progress. The Jedi on the other hand are making good progress, as Harry's shield is powerful enough to withstand most of their spells, giving the Jedi the chance to press their attack. Plo Koon's Force Judgment proves to be useful, its unexpected nature throwing the Death Eaters off balance and causing them to double over in pain. Mace Windu twirls his blade, and Saber throws all of the heads off of the Death Eaters, before turning his head to the right and seeing Harry on the floor. Master Windu was the first to rush to Harry's body, blood covering his torso. Looking for any wound to hold back, Windu couldn't find any, and asks Yoda to check. Yoda also fails to find a wound, but searching Harry's sock finds a jagged mirror. Looking into it, Yoda sees a flash of blue before it disappears. Lifting Harry into the air with the Force, Yoda keeps as much of Harry's blood in his body as possible before a pop resonated the streets. The wide eyes of Dobby emerge, his hands emitting house elf magic, and begins to quickly heal Harry, quite oblivious to the presence of the Jedi. With another 2 quick pops, Dobby was back with a blood replenishing potion, and Harry stirred again, his exposed scars causing him to wince in pain. Dobby transfigures a nearby bin into a stretcher and applied Essence of Dittany onto the major wounds. Harry now sat upon the stretcher and formally introduced Dobby to the clones and Jedi. Dobby is not surprised, as he pulls out a copy of the Daily Prophet from his multicoloured clothes. The front picture is a giant picture of Harry, but in smaller print at the bottom was a ransom for the mysterious warriors. But before they could continue, they needed to heal. Harry in particular was exceptionally hungry. Moving inside an abandoned cafe, Dobby brings food for all of the group, re-energizing them all immediately, despite the Jedi being initially confused at the food. It was far different from anything at Dex's diner. The news in the Daily Prophet meant that Harry needed to move fast, despite the protests from his body. With a quick thanks to Dobby, who apparates, Harry gets up from his chair as the group hear the clattering of plates. Harry readies his wand, and the Jedi prepare their lightsabers. Now approaching the kitchen, Harry just manages to put up a shield charm in time as a wooden door came hurtling towards him. The door ricochets off of the wall, and Yoda catches it with the Force before it could hit Commander Cody and throws it back towards the assailant. The assailant falls to the floor, and the face reveals a snatcher. Harry is bemused. Was this an isolated attack? And how did they know they would be here? Harry's thoughts are interrupted by an ear-splitting sound. The whole cafe rumbled, and the ground shook, and they were in trouble. Harry has to think fast. Pointing his wand at the ceiling, Harry casts a powerful reductor curse, blowing a hole in the roof. The Jedi and the clones ascend upwards, and Anakin uses the Force to lift Harry out. Now standing on top of the roof, they are surrounded by a dozen or so broomsticks, each ridden by Death Eater. Immediately, spells came streaming towards the Jedi, and Harry could not go on the offensive, as he could only roll and dodge the curses. Something had to change. Now seeing the focus was away from him, Harry casts a quick disillusionment charm on himself, confusing the Death Eaters. Harry fires his disarming spell at one of the Death Eaters, and sent him tumbling to the ground. Before the broom could shatter to the floor, Harry uses a summoning charm, and to his relief, it landed in the palm of his hand. Now able to fly, Harry began to fly circles and loops around the Death Eaters, altering the focus away from the Jedi. Anakin is the first to notice this, and raises his hand to choke the life out of 2 Death Eaters, who collide into each other. Seeing Harry on a broomstick, Obi-Wan and Ahsoka take the 2 which have just fallen beside them, and hop aboard. Although they are novices, their natural affinity with the Force helps their balance, and soon, Ahsoka gains enough confidence to stand on her broom and slices the head off Death Eaters, hopping from broomstick to broomstick. Soon the Jedi and the clones are done with the Death Eaters, and they each decide to take a broom to head back to the leaky cauldron. The scene is a lot different from their initial arrival. The exterior is unrecognisable, a charred mess. Extinguishing the remaining flames with a jet stream of water, Harry heads back into Diagon Alley, on the off chance any other Jedi had wandered in. The previously bustling street turns out to be empty, and Harry heads back outside. Doing a quick head count, Harry notices something is odd. Somebody is missing. They had not had any casualties thus far, but one recon trooper, Harry now identified, was missing. Anakin and Harry exchange expressions of confusion, but this look gradually turns to one of horror. There had been a traitor in the mix. That would explain all of the chance encounters with Death Eaters. But now was not the time to ask who or why the traitor had done this. They would surely have reported everything to Voldemort by now. Their cover was blown, and they had no choice but to attack. Hopping back onto their broomsticks, the flyers are suddenly flashed by several bright lights. Obi-Wan is not too pleased, as the typically exuberant Jedi Master Quinlan Vos stood on top of a Republic gunship. Beneath him were a whole legion of clones and Jedi, led by Kit Fister among others. Now this was a better way of getting to Hogwarts. With everybody on board, Tech uses the information given by Harry to direct the gunship. The fast journey is a thoughtful one for Harry, wondering how he was going to find and destroy the remaining Horcruxes. He now knew Fiendfire was an option, albeit a dangerous one. Thinking of his other options, he remembered Dumbledore had destroyed Gaunt's ring with Gryffindor's sword, but he had no idea where that was. However, one option which did remain was the safest, the Basilisk's fangs. He just hoped he would be able to speak Parseltongue to open the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets once more. Now approaching the coordinates of Hogwarts, Harry asked the driver to stop at Hogsmeade in order to draw less attention to them. Feeling the magical shield push against them, the ship drops down and Harry turns around to face the Jedi and the clones. After he disabled the anti-muggle wards, there would be no going back. The Jedi and clones salute Harry and he began to take down the wards. The real battle had now started. Having deactivated the alarms and anti-apparition wards, the band moved through the cold and see Dementors patrolling the streets. Harry was about to use his Patronus, but the Jedi moved them away with the Force. Looking round the corner of the three broomsticks, Harry sees 20 Death Eaters marching down towards his direction. Harry waves for the Jedi to move the Dementors towards him, and sure enough, the Dementors get the attention of the Death Eaters. As much as Voldemort thought he had formed an allegiance with the cloaked creatures, they followed nobody. Soon, the Death Eaters were throwing up Patronus charms, allowing Harry and the clones on one side, and the Jedi behind the post office on the other, to form a pincer movement and take out the disorientated Death Eaters. The frightened shopkeepers peer through their windows as the dust settles, including Aberforth Dumbledore, but there is no time for greetings. Aberforth now emerges from the Hog's head, brandishing his wand at Harry, telling him to get inside, his robes picking up snow as he strode towards them. Harry ignores him, as he had his own plan. A nice surprise for Voldemort was in order. Heading to the left-hand side of the street to Honeydukes, where the owner Ambrosius Flume and his wife had presumably escaped from, they head into the cellar and down the narrow passageway, which is a struggle for most of them. The clones light the way with their torches, but Harry knew that there were unlikely to be any traps in here. Now approaching the rear of the stone statue, Harry casts a mild Reductor Curse, but as expected, the defences have been fortified since his previous visit. Obi-Wan and Anakin step forward and push their lightsabers into the wall and see it dissolve at their blade. Now exiting onto the third floor, they find it to be deserted, but looking at the staircases above and below, Death Eaters patrolled every other floor. This would need to be a silent operation, whilst Harry looked for what he had figured out to be a Ravenclaw related object. Harry cast a silencing charm over them, and they moved to the first staircase. Harry had warned them of the random nature of the stairs, and sure enough, Anakin only just managed to front flip to the 4th floor corridor, before a gap appeared in one of the stairs. Anakin used this to his advantage, and grabbed the head of a Death Eater from behind, before cleanly slicing his head off, without spilling a single droplet of blood. Everyone else followed his lead, and soon, they were on the 5th floor, where the Carrows were waiting. Anakin is again about to take charge, but Harry holds him back. He had unfinished business with this lot. Waving his wand at a painting to the left of the common room entrance, it jiggled slightly from his position, distracting Alecto. Everyone moved forward 3 meters, allowing themselves to be seen. The Carrows pull out their wands. Dodging purple-coloured spells, the Jedi flip over the surprised Carrows, and force pushes a suit of armour into Amicus's path, forcing a shield charm to be put up. Now with the upper hand, the clones move in, their blaster fire weakening the shields. But in return, the silencing charm put on by Harry was weakening as well. He needed to move in for the kill. Dodging several streaks of orange light, Harry broke the shield of the carriers with a disarming spell, bringing them to their knees. With no mercy at all, Harry used a severing charm on their torsos, fatally wounding them. Obi-Wan shook his head in annoyance. It was no wonder he and Anakin worked so well together. Harry walked up to the common room door, and the Eagle Knocker began to speak. Just then, Harry saw the Jedi turn around, as a ghostly figure glided towards them. It was of course, Helena Ravenclaw. Harry was on one hand happy to find her, but was annoyed he had not worked it out earlier. To his annoyance, Ravenclaw was cold, speaking in riddles, but could sense her guilt. She had told this to Voldemort before. Harry pretended to be interested. He already knew where the object was. Knocking at the entrance to the common room again, Helena answered the riddle for them, before gliding away, and Harry rushed in and saw what he was looking for. The statue of Rowena Ravenclaw, and on top of her head, an imitation of her diadem. Now leading the Jedi again, he looked up to the 6th and 7th floors, and saw triple the number of Death Eaters that had been guarding the lower floors. Stealth was not possible here. The Jedi ignited their blades, whilst Harry applied a disillusionment charm on himself for now. Plo Koon, Mace Windu and Yoda vaulted to the 7th floor, and the Death Eaters turned around, unaware that they were surrounded. Attacking the 3 Jedi, the others moved in from the 5th floor, startling the other distracted Death Eaters, with Clone Force 99 also picking them off in a variety of methods. Harry now joined the fight. Using a borrowed grapple hook, he swung on a banister and began to fire cutting curses in all directions, injuring Rookwood. Seeing a fanged frisbee on the floor beside Shaq T, Harry transfigures it into a metal pipe and uses his high ground to knock out the Death Eaters. Suddenly, from the 7th floor, a bustling could be heard, as from the room of requirement, dozens of students emerged, accompanied by some members of the Order of the Phoenix. They all stopped, looking at the scene in front of them. Death Eaters one by one were falling, at the hands of very odd humanoid and creature hybrids, equipping what appeared to be weapons of energy. But looking up, they saw what they had truly wanted. Harry Potter had returned to Hogwarts. The whole of Hogwarts was filled with cheers as Harry was met by members of Dumbledore's army. To most of the students, Harry looked the same, but Hermione and the Weasleys knew better. Harry's power now radiated off of him, almost scaring them. Looking at Ron and Hermione, they had obviously solved their disagreements, and they greet each other tentatively, before Hermione asks about the Jedi. The Jedi leap onto the top of the stairs, with Obi-Wan assuming the role of diplomatic leader. With everyone now out of the room of requirement, Harry sneaks in with Yoda, and together, they begin their search for Ravenclaw's diadem. Walking amongst the towers of relics, Yoda senses something is amiss, and force pulls a wardrobe towards them. Out stumbles Crabbe Goyle and Malfoy, recovering to point their wands at Harry, not noticing Yoda was standing on top of the vanishing cabinet. Turning around, it is too late for the 3 Slytherins, as Yoda slices all of their wands in half, making them useless. Harry can only be smug at how the once bullies had fallen to slaves of Voldemort's needs. Incapacitating them with an Incarcerous spell, Harry sees a diadem on top of some discarded furniture and takes it with the help of a nearby sword. Yoda levitates the Slytherins out of the room, allowing Harry to destroy the Horcrux with his now more tempered fiend fire. Grasping the ruined diadem, Harry exited the room and threw it at the feet of Hermione, who had been taking notes from Obi-Wan up to this point, much to the annoyance of Ron. Hermione gasped at the broken Horcrux. Her mind could not process this sudden overload of information. Harry and Ron looked at each other with knowing expressions. Gesturing to the neck of Hermione, the Muggleborn was slightly confused before removing Slytherin's locket. Opening it with Parseltongue, Harry did not even give it a chance to move, and obliterated it with fiend fire again. The surrounding wizards and witches look on in horror at the use of dark magic, but Harry was not concerned. The tension was broken by a bustling from outside. Looking out a nearby window, an enormous group of Voldemort's allies could be seen charging in from the distance. They needed to buy more time to organise. Leaving the Jedi and the Order of the Phoenix to position themselves, Harry hopped down several flights of stairs to the entrance of the Great Hall. Unlocking the giant doors, Harry saw his former greasy-haired potions professor. Snape was locked in a heated argument with Professor McGonagall before turning around to see Harry. Harry pointed his wand straight at Snape, the death of Dumbledore still not forgotten. Snape brandished his wand, staring coldly into the eyes of Potter. Like his father, his head was inflated like a balloon. Had he not remembered their previous duel? Harry was the first to fire, lifting one of the remaining tables towards the head of Snape, but the potions master dismissed it into splinters, which were redirected at Harry, but Harry exploded them into the air. Continuing to stride towards Snape, Harry dismisses every single one of the Slytherin spells, either with a flick of his wrist or a simple dodge. Snape began to retreat, his emotionless face hiding his surprise at Potter's exponential increase in dueling ability, before he was sent out of the window by Professor McGonagall. McGonagall wonders why Harry is here, and he declares that the battle against Voldemort had now begun. McGonagall sends a Patronus to the remaining staff members, and before long, the spirit of a spectacled cat returned with the staff. Harry began to assign roles for the staff, and headed out with Professors Flitwick and McGonagall toward the castle. It would not keep out the probably furious Voldemort for long, but it gave Harry a slight tactical advantage. At the edge of the woods, Professor Sprout had placed a collection of obscure and dangerous plants, which would hopefully ensnare any of the lesser skilled followers. And now, they waited. A sudden burst of spells ricocheted off of the wards, which weakened with every hit. Now with Anakin, Ahsoka and Obi-Wan on a small balcony, they unleashed their plan. Harry summoned a broomstick for each of them, and they zoomed over all of the heads of the unsuspecting Death Eaters and landed silently on the flattened grass. Using an already collapsed bridge-like structure, Obi-Wan and Anakin lifted it into the air and sideswiped it into the Death Eaters before hiding behind a clump of bushes. This distraction worked perfectly, as a group led by Greyback used their senses to hunt down the culprits. It would be their final moves. The Jedi operate in stealth, whilst Harry uses one to deal the killing blows. Now Greyback was left on his own. The bloodthirsty werewolf made a move to run away, but Ahsoka pulled him back with the Force and allowed Harry to make a cutting curse through his chest. The werewolf growled in pain, and with each subsequent spell, Harry listed off the names of Greyback's victims, before the once feared killer fell to the floor in a heap. Feeling more confident, Harry and the Jedi hop back onto their broomsticks and re-enter the battle. Hovering overhead, they see their diversion have forced Voldemort to rethink his plans. However, the mere presence of Voldemort was causing problems for the Order of the Phoenix, most of whom cowered at his name. But then a voice, not belonging to Voldemort, echoed into the sky. The voice called for Anakin. Anakin nearly lost his grip on his broom handle from the shock of hearing his name. He wanted to zoom after its source, but Harry held him back. This was not a part of their plan. Harry swoops down, now on top of the astronomy tower, and looks into one of the still standing telescopes. Down below, he can see the figure of Voldemort, moving slowly, but with great purpose, examining the battle on top of a fallen pillar. Leaning to something beneath him, Harry could see there was the slithering form of a Nagini. But several yards behind Voldemort was something even more concerning. Not Death Eaters, but another army of what appeared to be cloaked figures, ones which Harry had never seen before. Harry lifted his eyes away from the lens, and hopped back onto his broom. He had to take care of Nagini. Harry splits them up, pairing with Obi-Wan to take down Nagini, whilst Anakin tracked down the other group, along with the mysterious voice. Descending to the height of the third floor with Obi-Wan, Harry could see Nagini making her way towards the scrambling Ginny and Fred, who were fighting 3 Death Eaters at the same time. Harry was convinced his heart was about to fail, seeing Nagini moving past the Death Eaters and close the distance to the Weasleys. Harry instinctively cast a blasting curse, but he had no need, as beside him, Obi-Wan had pulled a snake towards him with the Force and sliced its head off with his blue blade. Rising back up to the astronomy tower, Harry could see Voldemort screaming, clutching his head in anger and rage. Looking up for the source of the attack, he saw nothing. In a fit of rage, Voldemort swept his cloak to one side and entered the battle. Harry knew what damage the Dark Lord could cause, and descended with his broom again, dispatching Obi-Wan to find Anakin and Ahsoka. The Order was now retreating back to the core of the castle, where Harry knew they had a strategic disadvantage. Landing in the main courtyard, it was time for Harry to announce himself to Voldemort. Using one of the fallen Guardians, Harry used it as a battering ram, hitting the Death Eaters from the blind side. In the commotion, the Death Eaters dispersed to various areas of the castle, allowing the Order to progress. But Voldemort is nowhere to be found. Looking behind at where the hooded figures were, Harry again saw nothing. He had a bad feeling about this. But Harry had no time to think. The screams of his family name resonated across the courtyard, forcing Harry to duck behind the central water feature. Now recovered from the initial surprise, he tapped into some of his power. Recognizing the unique mask design of Rabastan Lestrange leading a group of 20, Harry enlarged the water from the fountain to create a tsunami-sized wave, engulfing the majority of his opponents. Harry is now joined by Professor Lupin and Tonks, who bore several scratches and scars across them. Their appearance was unnecessary to defeat Lestrange, but Harry knew they had an ulterior motive. Remus and Tonks tell Harry that the Jedi and the clones were missing, forcing them onto the back foot. Not for the first time, Harry was confused. What had happened to them? Did it have something to do with the voice Anakin had heard earlier? He would have to sort that out later. For now, he needed to help his friends. Just to annoy Lupin, Harry decides to cast the most powerful disarming spell of Lestrange, knocking his wand from his hand and sending him across the solid floor. Harry leapt to Rabastan's whimpering body, and sent a cutting curse across his chest, killing him instantly. Walking back to Lupin and Tonks with zero emotion, they followed him with shocked expressions, wondering how Harry had obtained such a ruthless streak. Harry summoned his broomstick and used all of his Quidditch skills to weave past the collapsing walls and ceilings to find Ron and Hermione, who appeared to be having the most trouble. With Voldemort slowly approaching them, Harry pushed the Death Eaters back with another wave of water before Voldemort emerged from the middle, his robes completely dry. The remaining uninjured members of Dumbledore's army and the Order of the Phoenix primed their wands, some with greater hesitancy than others. Harry ordered his side to back off, as Voldemort now circled him, taunting him for killing his parents. But Harry retorted confidently by informing Voldemort of the destruction of the Horcruxes. They both raised their wands, with Harry preparing to make a move to his spare wand. And then they struck. For a brief moment, the beads of red and green met just as they had done in the graveyard, but the body of Voldemort soon turned into nothing. Most of the hall celebrated, but Harry knew something was off. A laugh resonated across the walls, silencing the cheers, as it was unmistakably Voldemort, telling Harry to meet him at the Quidditch pitch alone. The silence was converted into conflicting shouts. Some wanted Harry to go, but most were pleading with him to stay. Ron and Hermione held him back, but Ginny understood what needed to be done. Wrestling away from Ron and Hermione's holds, Harry moved menacingly past the shocked faces of the students and staff, their voices fading away. Although Harry moved into an area of quiet, the laugh of Voldemort continued to pound his eardrums. But he soldiered on, and now he finally reached a place he had so many fond memories of. Taking small steps, Harry walked beneath the colourful cloth awning, and his eyes lit up. The sight was not anything Harry had prepared for. He had been expecting a one-on-one duel to the death with Voldemort, but instead, he was surrounded by what he recognised as a field of ray shields. Taking some more hesitant steps, and using a cleaning charm on his blurred glasses, he could get a better view of the ray shields. Each one housed a Jedi, all of them slumped and only held by their shields and binders. Who could have done this? It would have to have been someone immensely powerful. Poking at one of the shields with his wand, it is useless, as his hand spasms slightly from the shock. Looking around the device, Harry sees a red button, but before he can push it, two figures emerge from the stands, cackling. Harry instinctively took several paces back, and was now sandwiched between two limp Jedi. Now getting a better view of the stands, he can just about make out the figures of the clones, bound by ropes, and with a silencing charm to hide their screams of pain. Shifting his feet in their direction, the first figure removes his hood, and unsurprisingly, reveals the familiar figure of Voldemort. The second figure, however, causes even Harry to be disturbed. It was Darth Sidious, or some kind of form of him. Harry thought he and Anakin had gotten rid of the Sith Lord, but clearly they were mistaken. Removing his hood, his face had a lot more wrinkles since Harry had last seen him, and then moved towards Voldemort. How they had formed an alliance he did not know, however he had more pressing issues on his mind. Just a small task of defeating two Dark Lords from different worlds and rescuing his Jedi companions. Voldemort is the first to attack, aiming a killing curse at Harry, but the younger wizard rolled away, seeing the curse hit the wooden foundations of one of the stands. Now Sidious attacked, but not as Harry had expected. Reaching his hand out to the form of Anakin, a white cloud of steam emitted from the chest of Anakin and went into Sidious. The effect was instantaneous. Anakin's body lurched uncomfortably and slumped some more, whereas some of Sidious's wrinkles began to fade, and he levitated several centimetres off the ground, gliding towards Harry. This was not good. Avoiding several more dark curses from Voldemort, Harry was getting desperate. He could not run around forever. With a quick summoning charm, the broom he had previously used hurtled towards him, and he jumped on. Weaving from side to side, Harry headed straight towards the stands, doing loops at the perimeter of the pitch. Harry first cast Severing Charms to get rid of the ropes binding the clones, before using counter curses to lift the Silencing Charms. Although some of the Severing Charms cut through the clone armour, Harry did an excellent job, considering he was having to dodge Voldemort and Sidious's attacks. Seeing Harry free the clones angered Sidious, and he stretched his hand out to drain the life of Grandmaster Yoda. Harry immediately ordered the clones to start freeing the Jedi, before Sidious gained too much power for everyone to handle. The clones silently moved around the outskirts of the premises, with Harry keeping the two Dark Lords distracted in the air. Landing back down on the pitch to the opposing side of the encaged Jedi, Sidious used this to his advantage and upended the Quidditch hoops, throwing them in the direction of Harry. Although Harry dodged them all, the hoops clattered into the stands, sending a hailstorm of splinters into Harry, which tore through a lot of his skin. Harry attempted to use a bandaging charm on himself, but Voldemort anticipated this and swiped away Harry's wand out of the young man's reach. Sidious and Voldemort stepped closer in, their eyes like hungry predators. Sidious lifted Harry into the air and began to choke the life out of Harry, Any attempt to reach for his spare wand made impossible by his ever-constricting throat. This was it, Harry thought to himself. His final act. And then, it happened. The wand that Voldemort moved away was suddenly back in his hand, and fired a spell with what he thought was his last ounce of energy. Landing back on the ground, he finds his glasses have been skewed. With a quick repairing charm on the glasses, Harry found himself free from the attacks, and saw Sidious and Voldemort fighting the Jedi and the clones. Sidious had an obvious limp from where Harry had struck him, so Harry turned his attention to Voldemort. Getting his attention with a tickling charm, Voldemort turned around, his wand held loosely in his fingers. No communication between the Wizarding World's two symbols of good and evil was needed, as they each fired off one last spell. A collision of green and red beams of light met, and this time it was for real. Forcing himself to take steps forward, Harry pressed the attack, the intensity of the light illuminating the fight between the Jedi and the alien Sidious. And finally it stopped. The light faded into the night, and the noises of battle turned into silence. The two bodies of Sidious and Voldemort laid on the ground, almost side by side with one last look of hate. But Harry and the Jedi had done it. Hopefully this time, they were gone for good. Moving towards some of the TIE clones and Jedi, Harry sees Anakin and Yoda breathing slowly, and uses a reviving spell on each of them, causing their eyes to flash open. The colour that had been drained from them had been fully restored, much to their delight, and none of their powers had been lost. A sudden uproar interrupted the moment of reflection, as the death of Voldemort removed the charms from the Quidditch pitch, allowing for the students and survivors to bombard the pitch. The Jedi didn't want the attention, and hastily bid farewell to Harry. They would see each other again, there was no doubt of that. Heading back to their ship, Anakin and Harry exchanged one last look before he departed back to Coruscant. With the Jedi gone, Harry allowed himself a look behind him, and was immediately engulfed by everyone. Although he appreciated the support, like the Jedi, he wanted some peace and quiet. Seeking out Ron, Hermione and Ginny, Luna managed to distract the entire audience, and allowed the four to sneak out of the pitch. Seeing the outline of Hagrid's hut, there was one last surprise left for Harry. Letting go of Ginny's hand, he moved towards an object which on closer inspection was a gunship, just like the one the Jedi had departed in. On the outside was a note from Anakin. From Chosen One to Chosen One, it said. From anyone else, the title of the Chosen One would have grizzled him, but Harry knew if there was one person who had been in his shoes, it was Anakin. Stepping into the cockpit, Harry beckoned Ron, Hermione and Ginny aboard. Firing up the power generators and closing the doors, he took off into space. He had no intended destination, but he was going to show his friends the universe.